Hello, I'm Jack and this is Entertainment World, and today I'll be talking about Legend of the Guardians: The Rise of Ga'Hoole, which was directed by Zack Snyder, written by John Orloff and Emil Stern, and was based off the book by Catherine Lasky, and is a children's animated film and Zack Snyder's first and only film aimed for, children. Which is actually pretty cool. It shows that he, was broadening his range there, and you know what? It works really well. However, like all films that I review, I will be starting off with the negatives just so I can get them out of the way, so then I can finish off on the positives, because I like to do it that way around. So, I'll be starting off with the negatives first. Okay, so my first negative is, even though it's a children's film, it is still a bit too dark for young children. I wouldn't recommend it for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. It's aimed at children who are a bit older because it is quite dark in places. It's a bit, grim, there's a lot of frightening imagery. Well, frightening for young children anyway. I would compare it to Watership Down. It's a bit like that. It's aimed for children. It's a children's film. But there's a lot of, quite a lot of violence in it. It's quite dark. There's some scary imagery. The villain is really intimidating and things like that. So I wouldn't recommend it for young children, like really young children, as it probably would scare them, give them nightmares and things like that. I would recommend it for children who are older. So yes, if you've got young children or really young children or really young sibling or cousin or whatever your relation is there, I wouldn't recommend it for them if they're really young. It would be more aimed for older, slightly older children. So that's my first one. The second one is that, just to say, the CGI is great and the characters are really good. The problem is there's quite a lot of them who look, there's one in particular who looks really similar to another character, and because they looked similar, it took a while to remember who was who, remember what the differences were, and to begin with I was getting slightly confused over which one was which, because I couldn't remember which one was which due to their designs being too similar in some, to begin with, and it took me a while to remember what their slightly different characteristics and designs were, if that makes sense. So like I said, because of that, to start with, I was getting slightly confused over which character was which, because of the fact they looked quite similar. And there was a character whose betrayal was obvious. You see that character, that character in a children's film who's going to be part of it, or he's part of the villain's scheme, or he's the main villain, or whatever it is in that film, and you can see it coming because it's really obvious. It was like that. However, the thing is actually revealed that he was evil early on in the film. It wasn't like you could see it coming, you knew he was evil, but again, because all the characters look similar and things like that, I actually forgot that it was shown that he was evil, if that makes sense. So, either way, I was still like, oh, that was obvious, and then at the end I was like, oh yeah, he was that guy. So either way, I was like, okay, that was either obvious, or again, it just adds to the previous negative in that the characters can look too similar. So, either way, that is a bit of a negative. Because it's a children's film, some things felt rushed, whilst other things felt quite long. It was the pacing was a little bit inconsistent. Things would happen quite quickly, and other things took quite some time to do, and it just felt a bit unusual. And things like locations and things seemed to get closer, when the plot wanted them to get to them quickly. So I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a place they've got to get to which is really far from the location that they're in, and the film's about them, trying to get there. But then when they've got to go back, they're there after 2 minutes, and it's really quick. And I know obviously the film would be doubled in length almost if they showed them trying to get back. And obviously if they've already gotten there, it might be easier for them to get back. However, it just again felt a little bit like, okay, that was quite quick, especially given the fact you showed earlier on in the film how difficult it was to get there in the first place. So that was just another little thing where I know it's a children's film, but if you think about it, it's a bit like, okay, that doesn't make as much sense as I want it to, sort of thing. And on that little thing being inconsistent, the other thing that was inconsistent was the tone. You know, like I said, in some places it was quite scary and it was quite dark and the villain was sinister. And obviously you don't want the whole film like that, you'd want the bright, happy moments. But there's like a montage to a song, and because of that, I mean, the song wasn't bad, it was actually quite a good song for a children's film. It's just that it felt like such a big shift. It was like, oh, scary, villain, evil, dark, dramatic music, scary imagery, and then cuts to a happy, singy-songy montage thing. And I was just a bit like, okay, that was quite a big, jarring feeling. You know, it's just such a huge shift, because it just goes from one extreme to the next. It's like scary, evil, happy, bright song. And because of that, it just felt a bit bizarre, and the song felt slightly out of place. It's, you know, a great song for end credits sort of thing, or to promote the film. It's just that the actual montage itself just felt slightly out of place, given the fact that everything else seemed to be more serious than that, including the happier, brighter scenes. So because of that, it just felt quite jarring, especially as, like, beforehand and after, the scenes are quite grim and dark and scary. And like I said, you wouldn't want every scene to be like that, but like, it was just one extreme to the other, so it was just a bit jarring overall. Okay, one last non-spoiler negative. I have one negative that is a bit of a spoiler, so, you know, I wouldn't recommend you watch that little bit of the video if you haven't watched the film, so this is my last non-spoiler negative, and it just follows a couple cliches. You know, I'm not going to like go into huge detail about it, I'm not going to do that, but it's just very small little things, and they're quite, you know, a little bit cliche sort of thing, so it's just that really. I mean, it's a children's film, so I'm not going to be too harsh on it. And obviously, they're good cliches, you know, they're not the bad, not this again ones, they're good cliches, it's just they're very common in this type of film. So, you know, I was just going to say that, you could argue there's quite a few little cliches sort of thing. And this is my spoiler negative, so if you haven't watched the film, I recommend you go to the timestamp I'm going to put up here to, you know, avoid it. But if you have watched it, you know, you can watch this, and if you don't care, then, you know, that's up to you. I am warning you, and I am going to possibly spoil this for you. So if you just choose to ignore this, you know, that's your fault. I'm not going to take the blame for that. So anyway, my last negative is the brother of the film who joins the evil side. It felt a little bit quick to begin with, like his just huge shift in, okay, I'm now going to join the evil side, and I'm going to be a villain, and I'm going to betray my brother, and I'm going to betray my sister, and I'm going to betray my parents, and I'm going to betray everybody I've ever met and join the villains and turn them all into slaves. But at the end of the film, when they're all celebrating and he's, you know, almost presumed dead at that point, the family don't seem to acknowledge it. The dad, the mum, the sister don't acknowledge, where's your brother, or is he okay, or were you able to save him, or were you able to do anything like that. They're just like, yay, celebration, we won. And they don't acknowledge the fact that the brother's missing, or dead, or joined the evil side, or anything like that. You know, like I said, to begin with, it seemed a bit rushed, whereas, you know, there at the end you can see why he turned evil, because they don't seem to care about him much by the end of it. So, you know, that's my last negative. That was a spoiler negative. So anyway, now I will be going into the positives. One last little negative, sorry. There's a character who he appears to be a good character. He's going to be a main character, and he's got a good story going, a good little story arc. But then his character just, I'm not going to say what happens, but something just happens to his character really briefly, and his story arc is never mentioned again. So it just felt a little bit like, oh, that was, I thought you were going to be a main character, you know, I was expecting him to be in the whole film, and he was a great character. It's just the way his arc just ends with no real conclusion that bothered me a little bit, but I actually enjoyed his character up until that point, so that's just one last little negative I wanted to say quickly. Anyway, so now the rest of the video. Okay, so my first positive is that the CGI is fantastic. And I mean it's brilliant. The film is a 3D animation CGI film, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's probably some of the best CGI I've seen in a children's film. It's brilliant, and Zack Snyder uses a lot of his good effects, slow motion, and he's good for the, there are action scenes and fighting scenes, and he's really good at those, and again he just shows how brilliant at those he is, and he does the dark scary scenes really well, and the designs and everything like that works brilliantly. You actually feel the threat of the villains, and you see these locations, good or bad, and they both work effectively. If it's meant to be a nice, beautiful location, it looks nice and beautiful, and if it's meant to be a dark and scary location, it looks dark and scary. So it just works. It looks great either way, and no matter what they're going for at that moment, they do it brilliantly. And even though, like I said, some of the character designs are a little bit too similar, once you realise what the differences are and you can start to tell them apart, their designs look great, and you can eventually tell each one apart. Like I said, it was only at the beginning. It was harder to catch on, but once you figured out who's who, they all look great. Their subtle differences are quite well done. Their overall designs are brilliant, and they all have their own little things and their own movements, and their movements look good, and they just worked. They all look great. So yeah, if I could criticise anything, it would not be the CGI and the effects and all of those things, because in this film they are all brilliant. The cast are also brilliant, and you can definitely tell the characters apart through their voices, because the cast do a brilliant job with their voice roles, and they all give them different, types of voice and different tones of voice and different accents, so you can tell them apart through their voices. I can't remember every single cast member because there's a huge amount, but I'm trying to remember as much as I can. But from what I can, remember off the top of my head, it has Jim Sturgis, Hugo Weaving, Helen Mirren, Geoffrey Rush, Sam Neill. I can't remember if I said Hugo Weaving, sorry if I said him twice. Abbie Cornish. So it has an absolutely huge cast, and they all do really well. There's a lot more in there. I mean, it has an absolutely huge cast, so I can't remember every single person, and because of that, I'm not gonna try to. Otherwise, I'll be here for ages. But because of that, I just want to say the entire cast do a great job, and they all add a lot to the characters. And in terms of voice acting and giving their own characters personality, the cast do an absolutely fantastic job here, and I can't give them enough praise because, like I said, they were absolutely fantastic. The humour for the film was also very good. There was a lot of good one-liners and a lot of very good back and forth sort of things. I was actually surprised by how good the humour was, especially two characters whose names I can't remember. And you could say that's another negative of the film, because even though the cast are brilliant, I can't remember the characters' names, and they're all very bizarre names. I mean, the only character names I remember are Clud and Digger, and neither of those are the main character. They're both, in the film a lot. They're major characters, but neither of them are the main character. I think, if I were to watch it another 2 or 3 times, I would remember every single character. But they're all sort of like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings type names, so it's quite hard to remember all of them, because they're all very bizarre, and there's a lot of characters, so yeah, it's very hard to remember all of them. I mean, I only remember those two, and even then, that's only because one's Clud, and the other one's Digger, so they're quite easy to remember, especially compared to everyone else. But yeah, the humour was really good. There's a lot of great jokes, and the funniest two characters was Digger and somebody else who, like I said, I can't remember his name, but they had a lot of very, very good humour, back and forth type of thing. I'm not going to say any of the jokes or any of the dialogue, but they actually did have me laughing. So yeah, they were brilliant. They were actually really funny. it's quite difficult for a children's film to make me laugh, and this film did make me actually laugh out loud in quite a few places. So, you know, I praise it on that, because I was pleasantly surprised by how good the humour was. I know this is completely opposite from, you know, humour and lightheartedness, so it's, you know, it's divulging from that quite a bit, but I will say that the dark scenes were also really good, because, you know, even though it makes it too scary for young children, the main villain looks scary. He's got a deep, scary voice. His lair location, however you want to word it, also looks scary. His minions all look creepy. He's got an army of bats that also look quite scary as well. And because of that, even though it makes it too scary for young children, it makes the threat feel real. You know, you buy him as the main villain, and you buy his army as an actual threat to the main characters. It's not like some children's films where they're too nervous to make the villain scary, so you end up with this just sort of like weak villain who isn't that intimidating, or a comedic villain who, again, even though he's funny, doesn't come across as a villain should do. This villain comes across as a very good villain, and his army, his plan, all seem to be very, very intimidating, especially to the rest of the cast. You know, you see why the main character is scared of them. You know, there's stories about them because they're a bit of a myth. The whole plot of the film is there's these, I think they're called the pure ones, the villains are the evil ones, and they're sort of like trying to make a race war, which is, you know, quite a dark thing for a children's film, where they see themselves as the strongest breed. We're the best ones. We're the best race of owls, and all the weaker ones will be our slaves and do all our work. And then you've got the Guardians, who are the heroes who protect, you know, essentially all the kingdoms of the owls from said threat. And because their original war was years ago, it's a bit mythological, and you can see why, because you can see why people tell ghost stories about these villains, because they do come across like that. They are very creepy. You buy them as a threat, and you see why the owls would be scared of them and find them intimidating. So, in terms of villain and threat and evil and all of those things that this film's going for, it does that brilliantly as well. The overall score of the film was really good. I know I said the song felt out of place, but even then that was a good, you know, end credit type song. But aside from the weird song montage, the overall score worked brilliantly. It added to whatever the scene was trying to go for. It was really, really good. It really added a lot to it. You know, with the film, all they needed to do really was focus on having good CGI and good, you know, humour or exciting scenes or things like that. But they also put in a lot of effort with the score, and, you know, it deserves a lot of praise, because, like I said, no matter what the scene is, if it's trying to be scary, happy, whatever, it adds a lot to it, and it works, it flows with it, so that deserves quite a lot of praise, because it, just like I said, it just adds to the whole film experience. I cannot pronounce the music composer's second name, so I'm just going to leave it there, but yeah, he deserves a lot of praise because it was quite a cool score. The overall film as well has like a bit of a Lord of the Rings sort of feel to it. There's a lot of mythology, there's an adventure, there's a young main character, there's a war going on, there's the older characters, there's guidance, there's moral, there's betrayal, and these like weird locations. So it does give it like a bit of a Lord of the Rings feel. Again, because I struggle to remember what everything's called, because I only watched it once and there's a lot to try and remember in one film. Even though I can't remember the names of these places, they are really cool. The overall feel is brilliant, and it does give it a good Lord of the Rings adventure type style and feel to the overall film. And I love Lord of the Rings, so I was actually really enjoying that, and I'm glad it had that feel, and it made the overall film feel more enjoyable for me, even though I'm not the age demographic that it's going for. And because of that, despite of that, I still really enjoyed the film. The action and exciting scenes do feel very Zack Snyder, and like I said earlier, he does a brilliant job with them. So yeah, he did that really well, and yeah, I can't praise that enough. The action scenes were really good, and they weren't too scary for children. You know, well, young children they would be, but they're not too violent or too scary, but they're still exciting enough for a child to watch them and enjoy them, or, you know, feel the tenseness of it, if that all makes sense. So Zack Snyder again shows, like with the rest of his films, he knows how to do action, and he does it again brilliantly in this film. And my last real positive is this film just has a good overall feel-good feel to it. You know, you feel happy when you're watching it. Afterwards, you'd feel better because you watched it. Your children are most likely to enjoy it. You know, it's a good film night for the family sort of thing. And it just has a good overall feel-good feel. Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean. And because of that, like I said, it just works. It's a good family film. I do recommend it. And because I felt good after I watched it. I was like, oh, that film's put me in a better mood. That was fun. I enjoyed that. I could watch that again. If you know, when I have children, it's something I would watch with them. If I had, you know, like family friends come round and they had young children, well, not young children, but, you know, like 8 to 10-year-olds, I would recommend it to them. You know, they would watch it. They could watch it and they would have fun with it. So, yeah, I do recommend the film because it does, like I said, just has a very good overall feel-good film. So anyway, those are my positives. I will just say, though, if you've got a 5-6-year-old, I wouldn't recommend it for that, you know, this film for them, because the chances are it will scare them. But if you've got like an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 9-year-old, 12-year-old, 11-year-old, whatever, I would recommend it for those sorts of ages, because it's a good film for that sort of age. And obviously as a parent, older brother, whatever it is, uncle, aunt, you'll have a fun time. So I do recommend the film for that sort of age group. And obviously if with that it works as a good family film as well. So I do recommend the film. I'm going to probably give it a 7.75 out of 10 for film quality. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 for entertainment value. It works really well. Obviously, I'm not going to watch it as much as I watch the other Zack Snyder films, because it's not aimed at me. It's, you know, it is a children's film. It's not something I'm going to watch over and over again. I would want to watch things like 300, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Watchmen, those sorts of things. But it is certainly a very good film. It's definitely a really good children's film. And Zack Snyder with this one, even though it's not my favourite film of his, it still just shows that he can basically branch out into any genre he wants to and still make a good and effective film for whatever that genre is, and whatever it is that he's going for, he is able to pull it off. So it works really well. I think it's funny that, you know, he had done really violent films before this, and then he did this film, and it's the same with like Happy Feet, because it's the same company. And they did that with Happy Feet as well. They got the Mad Max director to direct Happy Feet. And then they got the guy who directed 300, Watchmen, Dawn of the Dead to do this film. So I think that's quite funny. However, it works with this film. And I think that Zack Snyder was the perfect director to choose to make this one. I can't... You know, obviously there might be somebody else out there who could have done it. But off the top of my head, I don't know who would have been able to do it the same way he did it. Because he just gave it its own special flair. It feels unique. And it just works well. It's a good, fun family film, and I would recommend it. I would recommend it on Blu-ray. Where is it? There it is. I would recommend it on Blu-ray because, you know, like I say, with digital, unless you've got really good internet, the film quality is never what it says it is. So I do recommend it on a good Blu-ray hard copy. So yes, I recommend the film on Blu-ray. Good family film. You're going to have a lot of fun. So yes, thank you for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. My next review will be for Sucker Punch, and I'll be hopefully doing that within the next few days. So yes, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next review. Goodbye.